So let us begin with the first section. Mary's biblical theology of service for creation. As was stated already in the beginning, our theological reflection on the Marian biblical theology of service for creation begins with the ancient hymn proclaimed by Mary and known to us as the Magnificat. And it is in this text that we have now turned. And I'm going to read for us the text. And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely, from now on, all generations will call me blessed. For the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him, from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm, has scattered the proud in the thought of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and has lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in the remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever." And Mary remained with her about 3 months and then returned to her home. Earlier, I alluded to the Magnificat as being a form of canticle or prayer within the bigger, larger tradition. Now, expanding on this allusion and without pretending to be exhaustive in my analysis, we can see that this biblical form of canticle or prayer weaves a common thread that speaks to us of reverence owed to God, and a common thread of justice in and for God's creation. For example, these themes of reverence and justice are especially noticeable in 1 Samuel 2, 1-8, when the Canticle of Anna is found, and in Job 5, 1-27, as well as in Isaiah 49, 1-7. In these biblical canticles or prayers, we hear how God makes the poor rich, and how God sets on high those who are lowly, how God chooses the servant to be a source of divine glory. In some instances, these passages also make a direct connection to God's creation by showing how radically good creation really is. In the words of Job, and I quote, "For misery does not come from the earth, nor does trouble sprout from the ground. For misery does not come from the earth, nor does trouble sprout from the ground." Taken as a whole, these biblical forms of canticles and prayers provide at minimum the reader or listener with a new world order or ethos. In them, we can detect the hand of God inviting us already to reorder God's creation a reordering or recreation that seemingly commences with the lowly or poor. Now that's an important point, that the reordering or the recreation begins, finds its starting point with the lowly or the poor. Furthermore, there is a way in which these canticles and prayers also provide us with an implicit corrective principle. In them, we can detect a certain discontentment with human ways and exaltation of God's wisdom. And I quote Samuel, "Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. And furthermore, as for me," this is Job now, "as for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause. He does great things and unsearchable, marvelous things without number." With this larger context in mind, it is easy for us to see how the Magnificat is not a new message of reverence owed to God, nor a new call for justice in and for God's creation, but a message that needs to be reiterated anew. More specifically, like its predecessors have done before, the canticle or prayer of the Magnificat makes unequivocal for us the centrality and particularity of being a servant. And I quote, "And Mary said, my soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. For he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant." Here too, the notion of Mary's servanthood, or more specifically, the notion of being a lowly servant that comes to us in the Magnificat, is not an isolated idea or notion. But before we can get to some key biblical foundations for this rich notion of servanthood reflected in the Magnificat, and before we can explore these very notions of being a lowly servant, let me just reiterate that. But before we can get to some key biblical foundations for this rich notion of servanthood reflected in the Magnificat, and before we can explore how these very notions of being a lowly servant can help us better situate ourselves in a positive relationship to creation, it is important to make some clarifications on the very philosophical or categorical notion of servanthood as being more than servitude.